The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai.
Hello, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband, Steve, is the producer of the podcast. As a reminder, please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star rating, or go to YouTube and subscribe on YouTube. I shouldn't say or, and go to YouTube and subscribe on YouTube and give our various podcasts a thumbs up. Thank you for listening. This is episode number 157, which means we are entering our 4th year of weekly podcasts. And while we have gotten some feedback during our 3 years of podcasting, please feel free to contact us. Our email is simple. It's theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com. And we have a Facebook page called The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. So please connect up with us and give us your feedback. Today I'm going to be interviewing Pamela Seefeld. Pamela is called a Pharmacognosy consultant, and I will explain what that word means. Pamela is a registered pharmacist who prefers to dispense medicinal plants and other natural substances instead of prescription drugs. Pamela has more than 25 years' experience choosing and selling top-quality medicinal supplements, so she's seen it all. During the course of her study, she took a particular interest in pharmacognosy, which is the study of medicinal plants. She has been involved in metabolic support, vitamin therapeutics, and medicinal natural products for a number of years. She insists on thorough and complete references in her work, and she puts forth a tremendous amount of time traveling within the United States and abroad to both lecture and achieve knowledge in the field of pharmacognosy. She personally researches and selects every product that they carry at Botanical Resource, which is her company, and she assures they are of the highest quality. She is compassionate about what she does, and she's dedicated to her customers. She's a graduate of the University of Florida College of Pharmacy, and she has worked as an integrative pharmacist, teaching physicians, pharmacists, and the general public about the proper use of botanicals. She's also a grant reviewer for NIH in Washington, D.C., and the owner of Botanical Resource and Botanical Resource Med Spa in Clearwater, Florida. Her website is www.botanicalresource.com. Let's talk to Pamela Seefeld. Pamela, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. You bring a perspective that is unique. I know I said that in my last interview, but it's true. We typically like to have people on the podcast who can kind of give a different perspective on the same subject, which of course is the drug addiction epidemic, the opioid epidemic. And I love having you on and hearing what you have to say.
Well, this is really great to be here. I'm so happy that I'm here with you.
Thank you. And it's so nice we can do it remotely. We're keeping our social distance. It's all good.
Exactly.
So how did you go? I explained in my intro that you are a pharmacognosist. Is that the right way to say it?
Correct.
Okay. And how did you get there? What led you to do that? Why not just be a regular old pharmacist and distribute drugs? Why did you decide to go in a different direction?
Well, that's a good question. I went to the University of Florida for pharmacy school. And there, I was always interested in alternative medicine. My mother was really big into that. And when I was in pharmacy school, I started studying pharmacognosy, which is the science of plants. 2/3 of our drugs come from plants. So people that say, well, I don't believe in plant medicine, this and that. Well, they're consuming medicines, and when they consume medicines, they're from plants. So the origin of most of our medications is from plants. And when you keep that in perspective, you're starting to saying, okay, let's heal the body. Let's use natural products. So what I really do is I'm a natural product pharmacist. After I studied pharmacognosy in pharmacy school, they don't really hardly teach that anymore. But right. The medicinal science of plants, where these different pharmacological properties in plants go. And people need to realize that, once you understand how pharmacy works, and we'll kind of go into that as far as pharmacology, where things go, you understand that pharmacognosy is really where it's at, because that is the science of medicinal plants and plant chemistry. So the plants have their own unique properties and healing properties, and it's not some like wild crafted stuff, because what I do is very scientific. So if people want data, they want to know more about the actual products and how they actually work in the body and what area they work on. I don't like to deal in generalized concepts, but I really think that people want information and they're hungry for it. And especially after I started doing that, I work as a regular pharmacist, but then I realized that my real passion was getting people healthy, because medicines aren't going to do that.
Right. So if medicines are plant-based, I'm assuming that I know that opium, poppies, and it has whatever effect that it has. But what I'm thinking is, do pharmaceutical companies alter the chemical makeup of plants? Is that why we end up with such dangerous drugs?
Well, what they do is they look at, this is what they do as far as testing something. They have a plant, or they have a sea vegetable, or whatever it might be, and they put it through an assay. Okay, so this is how they do drug discovery. So just basically, you kind of see like on the TV when you're watching the news, and they'll talk about, they're looking for a virus cure or whatever it might be, and they show the little test tubes and going into there. That's called an assay, a binding assay. And a binding assay is what they do. So what they do is they take a plant and they pulverize it, they put it in some, solubilize it in some alcohol, and then what they do is they put it into these test tubes through these different things, and these are all receptors. Drugs work on receptors. Opiates work on receptors. A receptor is like a protein on a cell, and when you put something that binds to it, it's an exact match, and it changes the chemistry in the cell. So like if you take an opiate, what happens is it comes up to the receptor, it binds it, it's an exact match, and it changes the chemistry in the cell. So they actually have what's called binding assays, where they can check to see, and then they find out what the properties are. And then they'll isolate whatever's in there, and then they just use that. When you do natural product pharmacy, or like homeopathic medicine, it's a lot of what I do, okay, medical homeopathy, you're using not just the exact components, but you're using some other components of the plant that have beneficial properties. So it's very important to realize that it's not like all or nothing with these things. And the good thing about doing natural products is that you're not going to have the collateral damage, because the side effects really aren't there.
Right. Case in point, talking about withdrawal, changing the subject just a tiny bit, is that the withdrawal from heroin, for example, is
correct,
much less traumatic than the withdrawal from methadone, because methadone is synthetic and heroin has a more natural base, typically.
Exactly. And so what you have to say is that I think the body's just very inherently smart. I mean, we think we know everything about what's going on with the cells and the receptors, but we really don't. I think it's an infantile science in a lot of things. I don't know when we're going to have this massive leap. Look at the DNA testing now. Yep. I mean, that's changed medicine completely, because now we know that your DNA either puts you predisposed to have something or not, and a lot of it's depending on what your environment, epigenetics, and what you're consuming and what you're taking. So when you're looking at heroin, it's a natural product. It's directly from the plant. It's going to result much differently in the body than a synthetic product, because a synthetic product, even if it's binding to the receptor, the body inherently knows that the energetics aren't there, and it's not something that it really wants to embrace.
Right. But then I'm thinking, and correct me if this is wrong, because I could be wrong, but then I'm thinking that the synthetic becomes less costly to produce.
Well, that's exactly the thing. I mean, we're looking at it, and this is a good case in point, just talking about the situation that's going now. We've given a lot of our medication stuff, instead of like trying to cure people and use natural products to get the body back to homeostasis. We're using artificial things that are made in a factory, and the body, they're not going to always respond the same. And that's why you see a lot of these other side effects. But yet, no, you're exactly right. You are exactly right.
And we always talk about this on the podcast without getting into a big conspiracy thing, but, follow the money, and there you go. But it's interesting that you said what you just said, because one of the things, and I may go all over the place here, and I apologize if I get off track, but one of the things that I realized recently is I'm not a big advocate of antidepressants or anti-anxiety medicines. And one of the reasons why I think that there's a liability there is that because they are chemicals, they react differently in different people. And so you can have one individual who can take an antidepressant and maybe it makes them feel a little bit better. And then on the other hand, you can have someone with no history of violence who can take an antidepressant and murder his children. And I think that that's kind of what you're talking about, that because it's a chemical, the body's going to react to it differently, depending.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the reason why. I'm not even meaning to interrupt you. The reason why that's the case is that the chemical, when it's binding to the receptor, it physically looks the same, but the cells, you have to realize these receptors. I really think that they can recognize one thing from the other. That's why I use partial agonists to receptors. So I'll kind of go into that for a second. So like say you were talking about the anxiety medicines, the benzodiazepines, right?
Right.
The Ativan, the Xanax, the Valium, that kind of thing. Those are widely used. And so what we're looking at, we're saying, okay, how do they work? They work on the benzodiazepine receptor. Drugs that work for anxiety and for depression and for pain, the receptors for these particular medicines are in the brain. That's why it's central nervous system. That's why there's addiction, because it's going into the mind, right? It's going into the brain.
Right.
They have to be fat soluble. They're fat soluble. Water soluble chemicals that you come in contact with, they basically go to the kidney and you urinate them out. But fat soluble, they stay in the body. So what happens is if I have a benzo and it's going to go to this receptor in the brain, it passes the blood-brain barrier, it goes to the receptor, it binds. It's an exact match. It's in a configuration of the receptor, and when it hits onto the receptor, it changes the chemistry in the cell, and you get this very relaxed feeling, okay? But what happens is those receptors, when you get artificial stuff, they get conditioned, right? You get tolerance and dependence. That's what happens with all these things. Tolerance and dependence. So because the receptor, it's used to being stimulated, so it wants to be stimulated. So, but what happens is the effect does not work as well, and I think it's because they're synthetic.
Right.
And then what's happening is it's changing the configuration to the receptor, that the receptor's like, I need more of this. I have to have more. And for some reason, maybe it's wanting to have the binding more exact or not exact, and maybe because it's not doing it correctly because it's synthetic. But then secondly, if you use passion flower, which I use pretty extensively to get people off benzos, passion flower hangs out on the receptor. So what it does is it kind of is on there, off there, on there, off there. It just kind of hangs out. So the body actually prefers that, because that's why you don't get tolerance and dependence when you're using a high quality passion flower, which I have one that's it's pretty inexpensive here at my pharmacy, and it binds there, but it says prescription quality in it, so it works really good because I've tried a few different products. And when it hangs out, it's going to give you that anxiolytic effects, but it's not going to give you the addiction and the tolerance. So that's why I use a lot of this kind of stuff where I'm trying to transition people off, or they come in, they're like, I don't want to go on this medicine. They show me a prescription. I'm like, you don't need that. Let's try some other stuff. So it's important to realize that the receptors, they just have this want to be, they get conditioned by being stimulated, and unless you find something that kind of occupies the receptor, that's why people have so much relapse.
Yep. Fascinating. And, I want to just kind of make a statement for the people who are listening to the podcast. There's different reasons for people to go down the road of addiction. I mean, sometimes you have, people who just want to experience some kind of high, and it's almost more of a game that gets out of control, versus someone who has an actual situation. For example, and you can go down this road, pain. Pain is real. Pain has to be managed. You cannot operate with chronic pain. I'm fortunate I've never had chronic headaches except for one period of time when I was having babies, and so it was obviously a hormone thing. But to try and function with physical pain, it's really tough. So I can see why people would try pain medication, but here we're talking to Pamela Seefeld, and Pamela has alternatives. Go, Pamela.
You're so cute. Exactly. Well, exactly. That's the reason why we're speaking. So what I would tell people, and most people really know about, the pain receptors, these, let me explain. I was just going to kind of go into pharmacology about pain. So we have two kinds of pain receptors. and two kinds of pain in general. So we have something that works, it's centrally acting receptors, and those are like mostly the opiates and stuff, and those receptors are in the brain and in the spine. Those central means like in the brain. So there's centrally acting pain relievers, and there's peripherally acting pain relievers, meaning in the outside of the brain, and those are like all through the body. Okay, so when you take a peripheral pain reliever, you're going to get effects in one localized area pretty much where the pain is. And so an example of those would be ibuprofen, naproxen, Tylenol, that kind of stuff. Those things don't go into the brain. Okay, they stay out in the periphery, and they're anti-inflammatories mostly. Okay, so those are peripherally acting, and those work on peripheral receptors, and they really don't have brain penetration. A little bit maybe, but very little. The only thing that Tylenol will do when it passes a little bit of the blood-brain barrier is it lowers fever very effectively, and that's what people do. And if people want to know, what is a fever? Fever actually is pyrogens in the brain. What's a pyrogen? It's when a virus or bacteria dies because the immune system saw it, it breaks open and it releases contents. And if they get into the central nervous system, the body's like, I need to fight an infection, and it releases pyrogens and anti-inflammatory, and raises up your temperature to try and kill it. So actually fevers aren't always bad. Right. Except if they're high, because your body's trying to kill that and get rid of these pyrogens. So that's kind of what the chronology of the events with that is. But in any event, so then the centrally acting would be like all these opiates and these types of stuff. But also centrally acting, you have to remember, is CBD. So there's CBD receptors, cannabis receptors. They're in the periphery and they're in the brain. And why I like that sometimes, and I'm not talking THC, I don't like pot, I don't like any of that stuff. Right. But just CBD by itself, if somebody really wanted to use that, that does venture into the brain, and it does work for people that have severe pain, and it's non-euphoric. And that actually would be, that's a natural plant because, it's just a hemp plant. So it's not drugs. And it's not going to put you prone to be wanting more drugs. But if people wanted to do that, but I'll tell you too, turmeric, if you're taking turmeric, and people know a lot about turmeric, but turmeric and boswellia, those actually work centrally and peripherally, depending on what you eat at the same time. Right. So if you're taking turmeric, and you know what, actually, I have a lot of people just making just plain root. You can buy turmeric root like in the health food store, and I see it at the vegetable stand. Yep. And you can make that as a decoction on the stove. You want to make sure that you have to boil it with fat. If there's no fat present, it will not remove the products that need to go into the bloodstream. This is very important to realize. If you want, this is something I don't know if your listeners would have heard before, but if you want something to go into the brain and have a high peak in the brain, I don't care what you're taking. Like, say you're having walnuts, you want to have like all these omega-3s, or you're taking whatever it could be, the cannabis, or you're taking the turmeric. If you don't have a sufficient fat at the time of consumption, the peak will be less into the brain than if you actually had fat present, because fat has to be carrying it in. Right. So a lot of people, this is the reason why I bring this up. Say you've talked to somebody and they have really bad pain and they tried turmeric. Oh, that didn't work for me. I can't stand that stuff. That doesn't work, right? They threw it out. Well, why didn't it work?
Because it wasn't in an oil base.
Right.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Your food determines where the things peak. It's very important when you have a meal. Another example. Just talking about vegetables. Like, why are you supposed to eat your vegetables? Everyone's like, eat your fruits and vegetables. Well, what's so great about vegetables? Well, yeah, they're plants, okay. But why are they important? Because they contain bioflavonoids and compounds that when they enter into the brain and they enter into the fat-soluble tissue, they change the DNA expression. That's why people that eat really well look different than people that don't.
Interesting. The other thing, Pamela, that I want to highlight, and I want the people listening to understand this. So she talked about two different kinds of pain. If you've got someone, I'm guessing, that has cancer, they likely could need a pain remedy that will actually go to the brain and affect the body in general. Let's contrast that with a toothache or a tooth extraction or a sprained ankle. That's peripheral pain.
Correct.
You don't need an overall address pain in all parts of the nervous system.
That's exactly right. Very well put.
And I think that's a mistake that people make, because I think, and doctors as well. You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and give us a 5-star review. For more information on our sponsor, Narconon Ojai, visit their website at narcononohai.org. That's NARCONONOJAI.org. Or call 1-866-231-5924. That's 1-866-231-5924. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. Because they're prescribing drugs that will affect the brain and affect the whole body, versus just giving you something so that your jaw doesn't hurt, or your ankle doesn't hurt, or your elbow doesn't hurt. That's exactly right.
And so what I use here, like in my pharmacy, is I use, like, say people don't want to take ibuprofen, maybe they have kidney problems or whatever. You got to be careful with those non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents. They have a lot of side effects. You can't use them over an extended period of time. But normally what I do, like say I have a sprained ankle, and this is true. You want peripherally acting. You don't need centrally acting for that. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
So get some regular ibuprofen, naproxen, whatever you like. And I normally tell people, if you have an acute injury, it's 2 tablets, depending on their kidney function and their age, and then they can call me at my pharmacy sometime, and we'll give that information after. Because if they have any questions about adjusting their medications that they're taking or anything based on their age and their kidney function, which the doctors will never tell them, I can tell them how to take it. But like say I sprain my ankle, right? What the first thing you want to do is do 2 capsules of, let's say 250 of naproxen or something like that, 3 times a day. And we're going to do this for 5 days straight to get the inflammation and those inflammatory cytokines and components, just bottom them out. And at the same time, I normally would use either the turmeric, or sometimes I use a CBD, but I have a homeopathic called Chronogesic. It's from Des Bio. They sell to doctors. It's not that expensive. It's pretty cheap. The little drops you put in the water, and that reverses interleukins that are causing the pain. So if you're going to deplete out the prostaglandins, the interleukins, all the things that are causing pain, you have to realize little cell signals and little messengers, they're called chemotactic factors and stuff. They're the ones that are making you hurt. So if you deplete them out, it's not going to hurt. And then of course, don't forget that when you have swelling, okay, in any place, like say you injure yourself and the area is starting to get swollen up, the ice and all that stuff, I get it. But why is it swelling? Okay, let's just look at the chemistry. Like, why are we having swelling? We're having swelling because capillary beds have been injured and inflamed. And when capillary beds are injured, what happens is the fluid that's normally in the inside of the blood vessel, which is called intravascular, goes to the extravascular space, meaning the outside of the blood vessel, and that leakage causes swelling. So if you use quercetin, it'll close up the capillary beds and the swelling's going to go away. So you do 2 things. You're like ice, elevation, everyone knows this kind of stuff.
Yep.
But you're going to use quercetin. So I'm going to pull the fluid off that area so I don't end up with cellulitis. And at the same time, I'm going to do a targeted anti-inflammatory dose with a homeopathic and just get rid of it. And then you're back in business in a few days. That's the way to approach it. Not let me give you some narcotics. Let me do this. No.
Right. No. You don't, yeah, you don't need, now I forgot the other word. So there's peripheral pain, and what was the other kind? Is it central?
Centrally acting.
Centrally
Pain.
acting. So again, listeners, if you have been prescribed some sort of pain medication for yourself or for a loved one, ask your doctor, is it for central pain or is it for peripheral pain? And if they don't know the answer, you can contact Pamela and ask her.
Yes.
But this is an important point, because a peripheral acting medication, pain medication, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't going to be addictive.
Correct. Exactly. Because it has to go into the brain. The brain is your central command, right? Central command for your body. Your brain's your central command. So your brain is responsive in a mental sense and in a physical sense, right? Physically, like the receptor. It wants it on the receptor. In a mental sense, that I think I need this medicine. I think, so you have psychological and physical, right?
Right.
So those two are components in this process. So when you do centrally acting, the narcotics and the benzos and all that stuff, when you do centrally acting, what happens is the pain's still there, the inflammation's still there, but it just, the signal doesn't get back up to the brain. It blocks it.
Right.
That's what happens. It's like someone taking the switch and putting a little roadblock in the middle. It's still there. So you have to realize another thing. When you take an anti-inflammatory agent, an NSAID, you're actually taking the inflammatory components down. They're bottoming out, right? You're depleting them out. They're going to go. When you do essentially acting, the pain is really still there. It may be worse. You just can't feel it.
Right.
So it's not solving anything. It's not a solution. It's actually a hindrance to healing, because you want the inflammatory components back. I'll give you another example. I have women that maybe they have a pap smear that's bad. I mean, this is kind of off the track, but just so you realize. So I had a client of mine, and I know how to do this because I'm like, let's look at pharmacology. So she's like, they have to do what's called a colposcopy, where they have to take like a little punch biopsy to check to see if the cells have gone, and they don't want, uterine cancer kills a lot of women.
Right.
So they go in there, and it's a very painful procedure because the uterus, like women would have babies and stuff, the cervix, that area, the cervix, what happens is there's a lot of prostaglandins. They're already there. That's why that's just this area that they concentrate in, prostaglandins that cause pain, cramping, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's just that particular localized. So what I tell them, I'm like, oh yeah, well, why don't we just deplete out the prostaglandins and you're not going to hurt? And they're just looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I put them in a targeted therapy of NSAIDs multiple days before, and after about 4 or 5 days, there's none around. It's gone.
What's
like, bye. And they go get a punch biopsy and no pain.
Pamela, what's an NSAID? You lost me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agent. So it's the ibuprofen. It's the naproxen.
Okay.
All that stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, the prostaglandins are making you hurt, so let's just get rid of them.
Right. You're basically getting rid of the inflammation in the cervix.
Exactly. Just get rid of it. Gone. Bye. And they come back, they're like, that worked. I'm like, I told you.
And I'm going to bring up a story I have told many times on this podcast because you are educating me and I am understanding more. I broke my back when I was 18. It healed fine. I am not in chronic pain, but because of the break and because of the misshape or the wrongly shaped vertebra, the vertebra below it have various hairline fractures and arthritis and what have you. So bottom line is I have a bad lower back. So I was headed to Los Angeles for the birth of my youngest grandchildren, and I picked up a 45-pound suitcase in the wrong way and heard a loud pop in my back, and then had to sit on a plane for 8 hours. And then was in Los Angeles trying to help take care of the older grandchild and the babies and everything. Well, after about a week, I said, okay, I got to go see an orthopedist because I'm in a lot of pain. But he gave me the 10-day thing of steroids, prednisone, but he also gave me a prescription for one of these opiates. And I knew that all I needed was the steroids because what was causing the pain was the inflammation. There was no new injury. It was just the inflammation. And so I took the prescription for the opiates and basically tore it up and threw it away. But that's a perfect example of of not doing a central painkiller. I didn't need that, okay?
Exactly.
What I needed was to address the inflammation, which was exactly what the steroids did. Exactly. And
well, that's what the studies show. What you're telling is the new studies show this, but they're really not listening to it. The studies show that for back injuries, if you do targeted anti-inflammatories with steroids right away, with heat, cold, whatever is depending on where the injury is, they do far better and have a high rate of recovery than if you're using narcotics. Because you remember what I told you.
You're just covering it up.
Narcotics don't solve the inflammatory components and the releasing of the area. And remember, these inflammatory components, they're not innocuous.
Right.
They are damaging tissue permanently.
Yep. And all the opiate is doing is covering it up so that you can then
blocking the signal. That's all it's doing.
Yeah,
blocking. No healing. Blocking only.
Continue to damage that part of your body.
That's exactly right. And what happens to athletes, right? Case in point, football players and stuff, they start taking those things. They don't do targeted anti-inflammatories and targeted steroids or whatever the case may be for that, quercetin to get the fluid off the area, and then they're chronically addicted. And so this is easily avoidable. It's very avoidable.
Hear that, people? It's easily avoidable.
Yeah, no, and you know what? The best part about this whole podcast that we're doing, this isn't opinion.
No,
my background's pharmacology. You can talk. Go call up National Institute of Health. Ask them. Ask a pharmacologist. Go look at a lecture online. What I'm telling you is exactly the truth. It's targeted information. People need to know exactly what's really going on, peripherally and centrally. It's pretty. Once in a while, you hear that a few times. You're going to remember. What kind of pain do I have? You have a question about how to manage your pain? I can help you. I've been doing this 25 years. I'm right here in Clearwater, and I still work as a clinical pharmacist for hospitals. I know both very well, and it's not that pharmacy's bad and homeopathy's better. It's not about that, because in a hospital people realize that most of the time the pharmacist in the hospital, I'm not handling drugs, we're dosing antibiotics. I'm in Florida. There's a lot of elderly people. When they come in, they need adjustments on everything. I mean, they're not able to clear them with their kidneys, so we just adjust, that kind of thing. So it's not like someone sitting there counting pills. I don't think I ever touch a pill. We're doing that. But it's important to realize that we want to make sure that we do targeted therapy as to where the pain is, because what happens is if you start having pain in a particular area and you start treating it with centrally acting agents, and it's not a necessary thing to do, then you're going to really have a lot of issues. And permanent issues, because you're going to think two things, right? Addiction, tolerance, that product, that situation there, which will, impair your ability to think, impair your ability to enjoy your life, and make you addicted to something and make you dependent on something. And secondly, the area is not healed.
Long-term damage, physical damage. Yep.
Yeah. So why would you do that? Why? When you actually know this now, why wouldn't you want the area to just be healed up and done? I don't know. I know I've got this kind of all or nothing personality. That's just my personality. I've always been that way. I just, I just do what I need to do. I assess the situation and move on. I'm not one of these, what are we going to do? And I look at people like, we got to get rid of this now.
Yes.
Enough. Do you want to be dealing with this for years?
Yes. And how many more people need to die? I mean, come on.
It's crazy.
How many more overdoses do we have to have? How many more parents have to lose their children? How many more children have to lose their parents? How long do we want this to go on without looking for an alternate solution? And as far as I can see, the only time you need one of these central painkillers is if you're going to die. If you have something like cancer that you cannot address, that is not going to get better, you're in stage 4, and the whole thing then is palliative care, and you just don't want the person to be in pain. But if you're listening to this podcast and you're not in that situation, you better reevaluate what kinds of medications you're taking. And
that's very well stated.
And the doctors do not know what Pamela knows. They are not taught pharmacognosy. They are barely taught nutrition.
And, yeah, exactly. And this is like it's a really unknown science. I tell you, and I'm not just saying okay, I'm so smart, I know so much. I've been to a lot of meetings. I'm a member of American Society of Pharmacognosy and different meetings, even pharmacy meetings, alternative meetings. And when I go someplace, people are like, what do you do again? How do you, because I mean, I'll tell you, I have one thing I can tell you. I have a very good command of chemistry in the body and where things are going. I'm very analytical. I'm always, when I tell people, I'm go, do you want it solved, or do you want me just to give you something to palliate this thing? It's not about that.
Right.
It's about solving what the problem is and moving on with your life.
Yep. I mean, it's right there. That's the bottom line. Do you want to put a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage, or do you want to actually find out what's causing the hemorrhage?
That's exactly right. I always tell people, I'm kind of like, well, let's go back in time and let's see like what's really happening there. And when we look at like vascular injury or pain or anxiety, and I always say, and we all have problems. I get it. And some people have different levels of anxiety, but you know, when people come in like, oh, I'm so stressed out. Cause I mean, I meet with people for free here in my office every day.
Wow.
And people come in like, I'm so stressed. I need anxiety medicine. And I'm like, and this is just my philosophy. I look at it, I'm like, well, what is stress? Stress is having a problem that you just really don't know how to solve.
Right.
That's really what it is. Now, granted, there's people who have stress because there's health issues, but there's a problem in your subconscious or your conscious, your reactive mind, that's trying to tell you that you need to solve this, and you just really don't have the tools for it. But using chemical components to try and like say, okay, well, I'm just going to forget about it, that's probably not the best answer.
It doesn't make any sense. If you think, I have a situation because my mother-in-law lives with me and she's dying and it's very stressful. So I'm going to solve that by changing the chemical in my brain. Does that make sense to you people?
It's making it worse.
Does that make sense? All that does is numb you so you can't deal with it. And you run the risk of addiction.
That's exactly right. So then when that situation resolves, you have collateral damage in your own body because, first of all, you're not better, you're actually worse.
Yep.
And now you have a dependency, and instead of focusing your life on the joy, the beauty around you, and all these other things, and your purpose in life to try and help humanity and do a good job at whatever you do, whatever your mission might be, because everyone's got a reason and a reason to be motivating themselves. Those things will go to the wayside because you're going to spend all your time thinking about how you're going to get more of this stuff.
Yep.
It's going to take priority over everything. And look at how many people that become addicted to this stuff. Their family goes to the wayside. They lose their money. They lose their job. Because the priorities are moved up. This is up in top priority now. It's not, and you have to realize that whatever the original problem is, it's maybe worse and compounded. So it's not any better. So it's important to be analytical, really.
Yep.
Let's look at what's going on. And if anybody has any question about chemistry and addiction ever, just call my office and talk with me, and I'll just kind of go over like what I would do, how I would reassess it, especially someone that's been on long-term pain medicines.
Yep.
I can help them with some of that, or anxiolytics. There's tools and foods and ways you can eat it and take it so that you get this high result.
Right. Plus, for my listeners, a lot of those medications, you cannot cold turkey them.
Correct.
It is deadly to do that, especially if you are on a higher dosage. So if you're listening and you want to come off of these medications, you have to work with someone like Pamela who can help you step down and put back in the nutrition that these medications have destroyed in your body so that you can come off of them.
Well, that's very well put. Yeah. It's I'm really much, my thoughts are really grounded in reality.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm like the best person, no, but I'm saying to you, let me tell you, reality is where it's at. So, and I'm not this deliverer of hard knocks, but let's solve where the problem is. And if you want it, then you can put your attention on something else.
Right. Because
your time is worth something. Time goes fast. I don't know about you, but like every single year, it like whizzes by now.
I know.
I mean, we're almost at, with the time we're taping this, we're going to be at Easter.
That's right.
I just had Christmas.
That's right. You're right.
And before I know it, it's going to be 4th of July, and then we're back to the tax season again for the property taxes, and the same old thing goes all over again. No, seriously.
No, you're right.
I'm already tax planning, and it's like I just paid taxes.
Yep.
So it's just really saying, where do I always say to people, show me where you put your attention, and I'll tell you where you'll be in 10 years.
Right. That's a very good point. And how much of the, excuse me for getting a little woo-woo here, but how much the beauty and the creativity and the wonderfulness that is you do you want to just waste?
Exactly.
How much of that do you want to just waste? You know?
You are a spark.
Exactly.
You are here to do great things. Don't let these products destroy and rob your life.
Yep. Or the life of a loved one. Don't do it.
Exactly.
So how did they find you, Pamela?
Okay, well, very good. So my pharmacy is a homeopathic pharmacy and herbals and botanicals, no legend drugs. I do not carry prescriptions here. I do not believe in that. So just to point that out. It's a natural product pharmacy, okay? And it's called Botanical Resource. And we're in Fort Harrison in Clearwater, Florida, and I'll give you my phone number. It's 727-442-4955. And of course, my name is Pamela Seefeld. And you can look up, if you search my name, it'll come up there as well. But I'll give you the number again, 727-442-4955.
Yes.
And I'd be greatly honored to help you and your family. And I do see a lot of animals too. So if you have dogs and cats that have problems, I don't charge for my time. And I'm telling you, vets are expensive. I cured my Bijan's kidney failure.
Wow.
And my dachshund had a herniated disc, and I got rid of that.
Wow. I love that.
With homeopathic medicine. Yeah, dogs are fine. My dachshund is going to be 17, and my Bijan is 14.
Wow. And let me say your website, which is www.botanicalresource.com.
Yeah.
Pamela,
I'll be glad to help anybody.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I can't thank you enough.
No, I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to talk to you, and I hope your guests learned something interesting today.
I hope so, too. I hope a lot of you were listening to today's podcast, and I hope that you understood what Pamela was talking about. She's extremely well educated in the field of pharmacognosy, which is medicinal plants, and she has addressed numerous individuals who have been addicted to drugs. And that's what this whole podcast is, not only about addressing those who are already addicted, but also, prevention and ensuring that more and more people don't get addicted and don't die of overdoses. And I've had Pamela on before, and I don't remember personally understanding the difference between a painkiller that affects the chemistry of the brain, which is like a central painkiller, which frankly, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably don't need, because I don't think we have people who are end of life. And those are the people that need a central painkiller versus a peripheral painkiller, which will address your headache or your sprained ankle or your tennis elbow or some specific part of your body. That's a peripheral painkiller, and those are not, they're not going to change the chemistry in your brain and get you addicted. So if you're listening to this and you are full on addicted, or you're not sure you're addicted, but you're taking drugs on a regular basis, I strongly recommend that you call Pamela and you talk to her about it and find out what alternative she's got. She's very gung-ho. She's very passionate about what she does. And I really like her. And I hope that this podcast was helpful to you. A reminder, subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can give us a 5-star rating, please do that. Find us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel, which is the Addiction Podcast Point of No Return, and give us thumbs up on the videos. I'm not sure if you can do a rating or if it's just a thumbs up on YouTube, but please get help and call Pamela if you can't think of anything else to do. Have a good one. We're starting our 4th year. Back again next week with another interview, and talk to you then.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai. For more information on Narconon Ojai, call 866-231-5924 or visit www.narcononojai.org. Narconon is a non-12-step rehabilitation program based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard.